Hi guys, Jamie here from JB Motion. In today's video we're making this cool logo reveal animation. So we're going to be using a bunch of rocks that are going to fall to a plane or to the floor, and then they're going to take the shape of any logo that we want them to. So we can use any vector, bring it into Cinema 4D and have our rocks make the shape of our logo. So let's get started on this. Here we go. Okay guys, so just starting off, I already have the lighting all set up, so I'll quickly run through each of my lights. So the first light is my dome light. So my HDRI, I just searched this one. You can just click and drag over and that will automatically add it to your scene. And then you can go to your details to bring the camera down to 0, so you're not going to see that in the background. I'm going to delete this one because I already have it here. If you go into the object tab, then I've brought down the intensity quite a bit and I've brought up the exposure. Then I have a kind of a light over to the left. It is an area light and I've just kind of positioned it pointing towards the center of the scene. This has a slight tint of color to it. So if I open up the hex value here, you can grab that there if you want to get the exact one. But this is all kind of personal preference as well with the lighting. I brought the intensity to this value here. The next light then, again, I've scaled these up quite a bit. If I grab a cube, you can see that these lights are quite big. So the next light is this one. This one's more of a kind of a bluer tint, we'll say. Hex value there. And the intensity is the same as the last one. It is a bit wider. And this light is kind of pointing from the bottom up to the center. And this is just a white light with the same intensity value. Okay, so I'm going to grab some rocks first of all. The rocks, so if we just type in, I think it's stones, and go to models. Nope, must be rocks. And if we scroll down here, so here are all of the rocks that I'm using for this. So I'm going to grab the stone rock 2, just download it or double click on it, zoom in there on that rock. I'm going to grab stone 04 as well, stone 05, stone 06, and stone 07. So I have all my rocks there now. And I want to close down this content browser for the time being. I want to put all of these into a cloner. So let's create a cloner and we can just grab all of these and make them a child of that cloner. Cool, so we have our rocks cloned. So now we can get our logo in. So I'm going to open up Adobe Illustrator for this. So I have my logo. Well, it's actually your logo. But what you want to do is just bring your logo in here into Illustrator so that you're going to be able to export it as a vector. So once you have your logo saved out from Illustrator as an Illustrator file, we can go back into, I'm going to close this down as well. We can go back to Cinema and we can just go here to File, Merge Objects, and we can grab the Illustrator file directly into Cinema 4D, which is great. It's very small, so I'm going to hit the Scale tool and just start scaling that up to very big, we'll say. So it's kind of taking up a good bit of our scene. And we want to rotate that, hit R on your keyboard and just hold down Shift so we can rotate that. Actually, I couldn't see it, so make sure that's set to -90. And we want to change some settings here with our vector import object. So if we go to the object tab, just make sure the layer offset is set to 0. And the path spread is also 0. And for the extrude det, 0.01. So you'll end up with something like this. Cool. So let's grab a floor as well because we need something for our rocks to fall down onto. So I'm going to create a plane and name that floor. And I'm going to scale this up as well. so that it's going to be nice and big. And I want to right click on this, go to simulation tags and add a collider tag. So that's going to be able to catch all of our rocks that are going to fall down and transform into our logo. So let's go to our cloner now, and we can start kind of bringing up the number of clones that we're working with. So I'm going to increase the width of our overall cloner and the height. So it's going to kind of encapsulate our logo. And I want to bring up the count. Now, at the moment, it's just bringing them all up and then ruining the size we just set. So what we can do is set this to end point, and we can start bringing up the count of these rocks and up along this axis as well. And what we can do is move our cloner up. So we're going to be able to get some kind of along the y-axis, some clones along the y as well. So maybe 3 of those, or actually, yeah, about 3 of those, and then kind of make some space for them along that y-axis also. Cool, so now we have all our rocks, and what we want to do is make these fall to the ground and land on the floor. So right click on your cloner, go to simulation tags and add a rigid body tag to that. And now if we just hit, before we hit play, actually go to your cloner and just make sure render instance is selected so that we get a nice, we'll get a faster simulation. Let's increase our frame range as well. We'll go up to like 500. Give ourselves plenty of space, and now we can just hit play. Okay, so they all fell down and they're quite uniform at the moment. So I want to get some randomization in here, make these a bit more random. So select your cloner, go to the effectors here, and we're going to grab a random, not here, it is here. Grab a random effector, and we can go to our parameters tab, and we want to affect the rotation. Just grab some random rotation values there, and scale as well. Uniformly scale this, set it to a value of -1, maybe not even -1, just kind of -0.4 or something like that to get some random scale in there as well. So now if we let these fall to the ground, let's hit play. So we want to let this settle. So we gave ourselves a good bit of space in the frame range. We'll just let it play out there. I'll zoom out here so we can see our timeline indicator. So once that's kind of settled, we can pause that, go to our rigid body tag and go to the dynamics tag, tab, I should say. Tab tag, always get those two mixed up, and just set the initial state. So now that's going to be where it starts from, where the simulation starts from. So if we hit play there now, that's just going to play from that initial state. So the next thing we want to do is basically start morphing these, start attracting our rocks towards our logo outline. So to do that, we'll select our cloner. Let's go to, actually, let's do a file save, do a file save as. So let's go to simulate forces and grab a field force. So we're going to drag our logo down here and tell it to act as a spline object. And we want to set a strength of, say, 2000. We can bring that down for now. You're going to see a bunch of lines and they're going to get in the way. So what you can do is go to your display tab to turn off the visibility of those. Let's go back to the object tab now and go to our logo here. Before we do anything else, let's just see what's going to happen. So you can see there that the rocks are kind of moving around in a kind of a circle, we'll say. So we want them to be attracted directly towards the shape of our logo vector. So to do that, we select the spline here that we've just added, and we'll set the distance mode to radius. Let's bring the radius up to something like 500. And now if we play that, So we're getting some traction now. Actually, it looks like we're getting some kind of, it's like it's being repelled, like the rocks are being repelled by the logo. So what we can do is go back to our field force and set a minus value for this. Let's play now. Let's get a better view here as well. So let's play that now. So now you can see that the rocks are being dragged towards the actual lettering of our logo. So that's looking a lot better. We might bring up the field force, or bring it down even back to minus 3000, see if that kind of gives us a better result. Yeah, so it looks kind of a bit better there now. You can see that we're kind of getting a bit more resolution, I suppose, with regards to being able to see the lettering, because it's pulling more rocks towards it. We could even go a bit further with that. So if we go to like minus 5000. So that's looking even better. Okay, cool. So let's do a file save and let's set up a camera now. So grab a Redshift camera, make it active, go to your coordinates tab, and let's set this to 0, minus 90. So we're looking straight down, and then we can just kind of position this how we want it. So we're going to have it something like this for a finish, we'll say. And let's make sure that it's kind of relatively in the center. We might zoom it out even a little bit more. And let's do a file save, and let's go to our Redshift IPR view. I have one set up here. So if you can't see that, you just go to the Redshift render view here. You can open that up. So let's see what this is looking like. Okay, so it's not looking too bad. You might say that we could make the logo itself a bit bigger. So we're going to stretch out those rocks, because if we kind of just zoom in a bit here, we'll say, like, you could say that the rocks are very big. We could scale down the rocks as well. So we might just scale up the logo and see how that looks. Or no, we'll scale down the rocks. We'll scale down the rocks. So stop that from rendering. Let's go back to frame 0. And we're going to be grabbing all of these stones here. And we can just grab our scale tool and let's get out of this camera so we can kind of zoom in a bit, see what we're doing. So let's scale all of these down. I'm just going to eyeball on this as well. So now if we hit play on that, let them kind of get into position. Let's make our camera active again. So that could be better. We might need to bring down the field force strength now down to like minus 3000. Because the rocks are smaller, it seems that it's doing a better job of attracting them in. So let's pause that and see if that looks any clearer. So I think that the logo is looking, or the text, it's really, you could say, is looking a little bit clearer now that we kind of brought the scale of those rocks down a bit. And we might even bring so if we actually go back to frame 0 here, let's go to our rigid body tag and go to dynamics. Let's clear the initial state, and we might just kind of grab our cloner and just kind of bring the actual width of this cloner down to make it closer to the width and height of our actual logo. So now if we kind of play this now, see how we get on. So that is looking a bit better, I think. So it's looking a lot better. You can see that we don't have any stragglers left over. You could say that it was nice with a few stragglers as well around the edges. So to find that kind of happy middle ground, we might just kind of scale up our cloner a little bit along the width and a little bit along the height. And let's have a look at that now again. So we might need to go a bit more width and height, up more in the width, up more in the height. I feel like we're getting closer to our starting point, but let's see. We could bring down the strength as well as the field force a bit. Okay, let's try bringing down the field force strength down to minus 2000. I think that's actually where we started. But again, it's all about kind of tweaking stuff, trial and error to get this kind of how you want it. Yeah, so I think that's a bit better because we have a few stragglers that are kind of taking their time to kind of get in there, and even some that are left behind. So I think that's looking pretty good. So we'll just go a bit closer here and have a look at this on our render view. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. So what I want to do now is create another cloner because all these rocks are more or less the same size. We do have a random effector kind of randomizing the scale a little bit. But I want to get some really small rocks in there and also have them less drawn towards the logo, so we'll have even more stragglers. So we'll do a file save and stop this rendering there. Let's grab this cloner, hold down Control, click and drag, so we have another cloner. We're going to grab all of these and we're going to scale these right down. Let's go to our default view so we can see these being scaled. Scale those right down. So they're going to be really small. And we can maybe bring down the count of these a little bit as well, so we don't have as many of those. So now if we go back and hit play, go back to my Redshift camera. So now you can see we have a lot more variation in the scale of our stones, and I think that looks a bit better. So do a file save. But again, we want these to be less attracted to our logo. So we're going to create another field force. Hold down Control, click and drag this just above the cloner so we know it's for this one. Let's go to our rigid body for this cloner that has the small stones and go to forces. Yeah. So we're going to say include. So it's only going to include the ones that we tell it to. Let's drag this field force 1 in, and we can tell this to have less strength basically. So we'll set that to like minus 500, and let's see now how we get on. Cool. So you can see now that those kind of ones are still kind of left behind, those smaller stones. So if we have a look at this, it's looking much better, I suppose you could say. Now you could go one more and do another one of these cloners. So if we kind of click and drag, so we have another cloner, maybe we'd have these a little bit bigger. Let's go to our default camera and we can scale these up. So grab your scale tool and we're going to scale these up a little bit. So about in the middle, we'll say, between the big ones and the small ones. So, and these again would be using the same, they're going to be using the same field force as our very small stones. And also we can mess around with the count of these, maybe bring it down as well. Something like that. So let's have a look now at this. Do a file save again. Let's see how this is looking. Okay, so I think that's looking a bit better now altogether. We'll have another look at this. Yeah, so I think that's looking pretty cool. So we just want to set up some camera animation for this now, and we're pretty much done. So let's grab our camera. We're going to go back to frame 0, and for the very start, we're going to be zoomed right in. And let's also hide this vector. We don't want to see that. So we're going to zoom right in on our camera. So bring that down right close to our floor. Something like this, we'll say, just so we can still see some stones. We might even go beyond the stones so you can actually see nothing. One thing we do need to do as well is grab a material for our floor. Let's do a file save, and I have a material that I found in my content browser. I think it was plaster. Let's see, which one did I find that was pretty cool? I think it was this one. So I'm going to double click on this, and I'm going to apply that to my floor. So now if we just have a look at this. So that's the plaster material. Cool. So this is going to be starting point, frame 0 for our camera. And then we're going to kind of play this out. So our stones are going to fall down towards the ground. An important thing as well is that we want the camera to always be focused on the floor. So if we go to the optical tab, we can drag the floor down to this focus object here. So now it'll always be focused on the floor. We can have quite a shallow depth of field as well. So we get some nice kind of, if I just do a test render here, you'll see that, well, we can't see any rocks that are close to the camera. Give me a second. So you'll see that the rocks that are oh wait, we're not getting any depth of field. We need to turn on bokeh. So now we're getting some nice depth of field in the rocks that are going to be flying past the camera, but everything is going to be in focus. You know, everything, our logo, I suppose, is going to be in focus. Now you can see that our logo is kind of taking shape very soon. So I kind of want to kind of hold off on that until maybe around frame 60, we'll say. So let's grab our field force, both of them. Okay, so they both have mixed values. So what we want to do is just work with one at a time. We're going to set the strength here to, we're going to set a keyframe on the strength, and we can just drag this to the point at which we want it to be max strength. So we'll say around frame 190. And then at frame 60, this is where we want the field force to be set to a strength of 0. So it's not going to be doing anything. If we go back to the start and hit play. So at the start, the rocks are just going to come crashing down and land on the floor. And it's only going to be around here where they start kind of taking shape. Now you can see that they're already taking shape, and that's because I have this field force also set to a value. So we're going to go to the same keyframe where this one maxes out, set a keyframe for this one also, and then go back to frame 60 and set that to be 0. So now we should get, our rocks are just going to fall. They're not actually going to do anything until these keyframes start kicking in. Cool, so you can see those rocks are just kind of falling to the ground. They're a bit slippery at the moment, so we need to add some friction as well. Let's go to both of these, or all of these rigid body tags. Go to, I think it's collision, and set the friction to 1 for all of those. And also our floor needs some friction. Let's set that up to 1 as well. So let's try this again. So those rocks are going to come in. They're not going to be as slippery. They're going to stick to that floor a lot better now with that friction. And then you can see here the the field force is going to start working. So things are going to start coming into position. But we can't actually see anything now because the camera is not looking in the right place. So we're going to set a keyframe for our camera on frame 0. Let's see, on the Y. And we're going to go ahead to, we'll say 120 for now. And let's bring this up to a place where our logo is going to be, I'm just turning it on so I can see, to a place where our logo is going to be fully visible. So just dragging that camera right up, something like that, we'll say. So we grab a keyframe there as well. Let's turn our logo vector back off, and now let's have a look at this. So rocks are coming in, camera is zooming out as well, which is kind of a cool effect. And then the rocks are going to start being attracted to the logo vector. Okay. So we could maybe stretch out the amount of time it takes for the camera to get to that point as well. So something like that. Maybe around here. So we have more kind of time where the camera's actually a lot closer to the rocks. Could look nicer. So we could argue that it takes a bit too long for the morphing to start happening, and maybe the camera is taking a bit too long to get up to its finishing point as well. So it might just reduce the amount of time that takes. Go to both of these field forces, so they'll be selected in our dope sheet. Just click and drag this so it starts happening a bit earlier. Let's have a look at this now again. So there's a lot of just tweaking and then having another look. So, you know, you kind of have to bear with it until you get it kind of just right. So that's already started kicking in. The rocks are kind of moving around now. And you can kind of start seeing the letters as well. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so I think that's looking pretty good. So let's do a render preview of this now and see what it's looking like. So yeah, that's looking pretty good, I think. Will we bring... So our camera does actually go out a lot further than this. And we could maybe stretch out the amount of time the field force takes to get to its max value. So if we kind of stretch that out a bit more, and we'll watch that now in a minute. I just want to add a couple more elements to the corners of this to kind of frame the logo. And I also want to make sure that the camera is zoomed out far enough. I might even just go to the camera's last frame, which is here, and maybe just bring that out even more. Something like that. Add a keyframe there. Make sure that it looks good. Yeah, okay. And I want to add some kind of elements to frame the logo as well. So we'll do a file save, stop rendering. I'm going to go to the good old content browser. I do hope a lot of you guys have access to this. I know it's kind of behind a paywall, a lot of this stuff, but hopefully you guys have access to a lot of this stuff that I'm using here. So type in stone. Go to models, and I am going to grab one of these. So I'm going to grab this one here. So let's just double click on that. We have it here. Let's close this down and let's scale this up. So it's nice and big. We probably need to bring that down as well. Oh no, it's on the floor. We need to bring it down a little bit. And let's get this into a nice position. I'm going to rotate that as well. something like that. Let's have a look at this now, see how that's looking. Might scale that down a bit. It's a bit big. And I will set this to Redshift camera so that we can jump out of this view and it won't change our render view. And let's push this up something like that and kind of pull it back a bit. Might scale it up a bit more. Okay, something like that. And I'm just going to duplicate this so I have one of these in each corner. So I'm going to grab my move tool, E on your keyboard, hold down control. I'm using this part of my axis handles here so I can just click and drag along the X and Z axes. So it's not going to move along the Y. Hit R on your keyboard and rotate that around. Okay, so that's kind of how it's going to finish. So that's looking pretty good. So we'll do another file save and we'll have one more look at this, see how it's all looking. We might have to make a couple more tweaks, but we'll see how we're getting on. So we are getting an error here actually. It says mesh cloner blah blah instant uses adaptive tessellation and it's not supported. So we need to disable tessellation on our rocks, but that's fine because they're small and we're not going to notice anything. So let's do that now. Let's grab all these Redshift render tags and we can make sure we get all of them. Go to geometry and turn off tessellation on that. We might just turn off the override altogether. So now if we do a render preview here, we're not going to see that error message anymore. So that's good. Let's go back to watching this out again. So remember we kind of tweaked how long it takes for the stones to start taking shape. And I think that's a good kind of amount of time. So the logo is just a bit slow. It's more slowly that the logo kind of becomes more visible and readable. I think that's a bit better with regards to the timing of it. And it's going to kind of come to a stop then around frame 240. Cool. Okay, so let's do a file save. We can say 242 is going to be the last frame. So we'll set the frame range end there as well. And now we can do a file save again and let's set this up for render. We'll do one more render preview here before we do that. Cool. Okay. So let's go to our render settings, go to output. We're going to output this in 1920 by 1080. We are going to go to our global illumination. This will reduce render times if we set the secondary engine to brute force. I already have mine done. So output 1920 by 1080. We're going to be rendering out all frames. So that's 0 to 242. And also we want motion blur turned on. So my one is enabled. Make sure you go to motion blur, turn that on. And I think that's pretty much it for the render settings. So we can go to save and we can pick a place to save this out to. So we don't need an alpha channel and I think that's it. Output save, fine. Redshift, motion blurs turned on, and we have our global illumination set to brute force for both. Cool, so let's do a file save again, and we might actually, before we render this out, it's always good to cache the scene, just in case your render stops, and then you wouldn't have to go from the very beginning, because, you know, with dynamic simulations, if you're rendering out, something goes wrong, you're going to have to render from frame 0. So we want to save the dynamic sim into cache. We want to cache that. So select all those rigid body tags, go to cache and click on cache scene. Cool, so the scene's fully cached now as well. So if we actually play this, it's going to play it back for us in real time. Awesome. Okay, so one last final file save, and I'm going to render this out to picture viewer. Just so we can make sure that we don't have any issues straight off the bat. Okay guys, so that brings us to the end of this tutorial. I hope you guys' renders turn out really nice. Please let me know in the comments below if you're having any problems, and do subscribe if you haven't already done so. Really helps out the channel. Thanks again for watching guys, and we'll see you in the next video.